What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we have another excellent episode planned for you. We're going to be talking about my experience at set championships, and before anybody accuses me of clickbait, my experience was generally positive. I don't think Lorcana is dying. I think a lot of people are worried based on the turnout that they've seen at their local set championships, and frankly, I can't fault you if you had a really low turnout, but it means everybody's getting Mirabel promos, hopefully. I know some of the stuff was kind of at the discretion of the store. I heard mixed things in terms of what the packet read as far as how many Mirabels were supposed to be given away. I guess if a store had less than 16 players, they were only actually required to give away 4 of those Mirabels, and I'm not sure if they were allowed to sell the other 4 or if they were supposed to be sending them back in addition to giving away the playmats and any other prize support they may have deemed fit to give away. If a store had less than 8 players, they were supposed to cancel their event entirely, not give out any Mirabels, so that could have potentially hurt some events. I've heard of some places doing closed events. Frankly, I don't think that's a big deal in terms of closing it off to the public, letting only your local players play who have been supporting your league time and time again. Frankly, I think that's kind of good for your local player base. They're gonna appreciate that store and probably come back even more and continue to support them more, which is ultimately good for the game as far as I'm concerned. I know some people were a little butthurt about some stores doing a closed set championship, but I think the biggest thing that hurt set championships this time, and why some places might have seen low turnout, both of the places that I went had around 20 players, but I think some of the places may have seen a lower turnout than normal just because the card isn't as desirable this time. Frankly, Mirabel is basically unplayable in the current meta. Maybe at some point we'll see some zero cost characters come out or something like that. Maybe you could take advantage of her with a LeFou deck if they do certain things in the future. Who knows, maybe she will be more viable at one time, but frankly right now she is just not something that's going to be hitting the board. She's not something anybody's playing, and therefore the value of the card is fairly low at around $50. The reason stores had such a high turnout for the prior set championships is because the cards had a higher value. Ursula was selling for like $300-400 when it first dropped. It dropped pretty fast from that price, so anybody who paid that price was definitely sad about it in the long term, but Stitch held value pretty well, and I think last I checked was sitting around $350-400. I don't know exactly right now. I'll throw a price on screen of his current price. When he first came out, he was selling for north of $500. It was feasible for somebody to travel to another state, stay in a hotel, win an event, and sell a Stitch to pay for that whole experience and still make some money while playing a game that they enjoy anyway. So I think that really changed things going forward. Like, you saw a huge, massive turnout for the Stitch tournaments. There was 70, 80, 100 player tournaments, which was crazy. But after a while, those cards did come down in price, and I think people were still pretty happy to have them. Several $100s for an event you paid $25 to enter is pretty good, whereas you're looking at a lot of stores are charging $25 to $35 to enter a set championship event now, and Mirabel is worth about $50. Doesn't seem as good, and particularly if you don't win, if you don't get into the top 8, a lot of time you're getting no prize support at all, maybe a pack at certain stores, but that is just not going to move the needle if you're paying $25 or $35 for entry. But that being said, big thank you to the Patreons for always supporting the channel and keeping us going with the Lorcana content, supporting the giveaways, which we're coming up on when we hit 2,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subbed, now's a great time to do so. And without any further ado, we're going to be talking about the deck list that I took 5th place with, got a Mirabel that I was pretty happy with, and got a little surprise in my pack support. So we'll talk about that at the end of the video. But if you want to see how I'm playing Ruby Amethyst with no Flynn, no SISU, this is the video to stick around with. I am also going to talk about some of the choices that I would have done differently and my matchups and how things worked out in those matchups. So the first card we're going to be talking about is I am on 2 Magic Broom Illuminary Keeper, a 1-cost inkable character, 1/2 stat line questing for 1. Whenever you play another character, you may banish this character to draw a card. Definitely a great way to take advantage of the library and get some crazy additional card draw. The reason I am only on 2 of these is I still expect, and I did see it, there was a lot of Steel Song and Emerald Steel in the meta. I also played against somebody playing Amethyst Steel, and these cards are a little bit harder to take advantage of in those particular matchups. We do have another way to circumvent that, so Magic Broom can be good, but it's more good in like the mirror match and stuff than it is into Steel. I did play a mirror match, and Magic Broom was very good. Another guy that was very good in the mirror match is going to be Chernobog's Followers, a 1-cost inkable character, questing for 1, 2/1 stat line, and when you quest with him, you may banish him to draw a card. I had an instance where my opponent had Fox on the board, and they had taken 1 damage onto their Fox, dealing with one of the threats on my side of the board, and I had Chernobog's Followers out. I think they were trying to bait me into attacking their Fox, maybe thought that I wouldn't. Comically enough, I was able to play a library on the following turn, move Chernobog's Followers in, attack their Fox, and still get a card draw. Next up in the 1-drop slot, another card to circumvent those steel matchups, we have Olaf, a 1-cost inkable character, 1-3 stat line, questing for 1. He is really seems like a very vanilla basic character, but the thing that makes him really good, particularly in Ruby Amethyst, is the 3 stat line on a 1-cost character. You are pretty dependent on getting those bounce triggers, either Fox or Snake in the early game in a lot of matchups, particularly into that steel matchup, because they have a harder time dealing with the higher willpower characters, and Fox is just a really good way to attack and get a favorable trade into something like Ariel. Takes out those Ursulas, both types of Ursulas in the green matchup, so Fox can really put in work. I think Olaf is very important to the deck to be able to avoid taking lethal damage. A lot of times, even if they are going to be able to play a song on him, they're only going to be dealing 2 damage in those early turns, and with a 3 willpower, he is going to prevent that from taking him down. He's also decent in the mirror match. I am also on 1 Minnie Mouse, same reasoning, so I'm not going to talk about it too long. Exact same card, except it is red, and it is a Minnie Mouse instead of an Olaf. Why, may you ask, am I on 1 Minnie Mouse and 3 Olafs? Because I own 3 foil Olafs and 3 foil Minnie Mouse. Played 3 in 1, so I can play all foils. Then jumping over to the 2-drop slot, we are on 3 Madam Mim Snake, a 2-cost inkable character, 3/3 stat line, questing for 1. When you play her, you get to bounce one of your characters back to your hand. I say get to because as far as I'm concerned, it is not a drawback. The reason I'm playing 3 Madam Mims instead of 4 is again going into that steel matchup and just into generally a heavy removal meta. Madam Mim is a card you do not want to have in your hand when you don't have something to bounce with her. You would much rather have a 2-cost that is going to stay on the board. I'm not crazy about Flynn Rider personally. That's why I'm not playing Flynn in this deck, because he also dies to all that steel damage as a 2/2, and he's potentially not getting you any quest value. The Snake, however, is very good in the late game with Fox and some of your other characters with enter play triggers, so you still want to have him in the deck, but I think 3 is a more comfortable spot than 4. Then next up in the 2-drop slot, another 2-cost inkable character in Kuzco, Wanted Llama. I think this card is great. This is a card that I was also playing during the last set as an alternative to Flynn Rider. He is a 1/2 stat line, questing for 1, and when he is banished, he is going to draw you a card. He's just way more aggressive than Flynn Rider. He's not going to necessarily be the greatest attacker in the world, but your opponent's generally not going to want to out them and give you the card draw. We're going to leave him in play for a potential bounce target with one of your Mims, if that is the necessary play, or you can just quest in with him until they decide to deal with him and give you that card draw. Another card that's going to work really excellently well with Kuzco, as well as those Olafs and Minnie Mouse, is Merlin Crab, a 3-cost inkable character, 3/3 stat line, questing for 1, and when you play this character and when he leaves play, a chosen character is going to get +3 attack, so you can play him after you've got Kuzco or Olaf or Minnie Mouse on the board, give them +3 attack, and then all of a sudden they're attacking for 4, and if Kuzco dies in that attack, no big deal, he's going to be drawing you cards, and those 4/3 stat lines with the Minnie and Olaf are typically going to survive a lot of attacks. Then we've got 4 Madam Mim Fox, one of the best cards in Lorcana, bar none, a 3-cost inkable character, 4/3 stat line, questing for 1. When you play this character, banish her or return a chosen character from your board to your hand. Same thing as Madam Mim Snake, except this character is going to have Rush and a 4/3 stat line for 1 more ink, which is just a fantastic trade-off. She is going to deal with those Daisy Ducks, which I don't care what anybody says are still very prevalent in the meta. I saw several people at one of the set championships I was at playing Hyper Aggro, and even people playing Steel Song, a lot of them are on Daisy Duck now because she is just such an aggressive quester in the early game. Also, with Steel Song, letting your opponent draw cards doesn't always feel so bad because they can go ahead and play Whole New World. So they can Daisy Duck in, let you draw some cards, and then Whole New World you and get rid of those cards anyway. But Madam Mim Fox is going to be the answer to your problems with Daisy Duck and pretty much any character that is played at turn 3 or prior, other than maybe like Gustav the Giant. Then another 3-cost inkable, we are on 4 Friends on the other side. Absolutely necessary, particularly in Ruby Amethyst. It is a 3-cost action song. It is going to draw you 2 cards. You can sing it with all of those 3-drop characters, and even with some of your options like Goat and Rabbit, which you're not so worried about questing because they're only questing for 1, and get 2 cards essentially for free. Always been good. This is a card I ended up losing in top 8 to Emerald Steel, which is one of my worst matchups. I did take him to game 3. I didn't see any Be Prepareds in game 2 or game 3, which was kind of crazy. But this is a card that you kind of want because you want to draw, but you want to definitely play it by turn 3 if you have it. And it is risky to keep it with Ursula, so potentially you want to try to draw into it, which is a little clunky sometimes. I did in one of my games with Emerald Steel. I had 2 of them in my hand, and turn 1 I was like, oh, I'm going to ink this before you take it with Ursula. And I think that led to my opponent not playing as Ursula earlier in the game. I had a second friend on the other side I was able to sing. Also, never keep Be Prepareds in your hand in that matchup. You're never going to get there before they're ripped away from you, so you basically have to try to draw into them then, and that was my crux in that matchup. I'm also playing for Brawl, a 3-cost inkable action, banish chosen character with 2 or less attack. It's not what you want to necessarily waste your turn 3 doing in a lot of instances, but sometimes it is worth it into like Flynn Rider, into Diablo, particularly in the early game. It also can be good into things like the 3-cost SISU in some instances if you're able to get your hand size small enough. Deals with Daisy Ducks, great way to deal with Piglet if you don't want to let them get super far ahead questing in the early game. And then I'm also on 3 libraries, a 3-cost inkable location. I did cut down to 3 from previously playing 4. It's a little weird sometimes in your hand. Sometimes it's better to have those characters out. It's a very aggressive meta right now, so library isn't always as good as you want it to be, but I did keep 3 in there because it is very good. The 8 willpower is crazy. There's so many instances. I've seen my opponent have 7 attack on the board and throw down the library because I know it's going to survive by 1. I had an instance in the game prior to going into top 8 that I won one of the games and we went 1-1. The game that I won though, I went ahead and threw the library down when they had Ariel and Tinkerbell on the board. The Ariel that has ward, so she is a 3-4 attacker, and Tinkerbell is a 4-5, and I knew they weren't going to be able to out my library right away. Got some characters inside of it, got ready to deal some things next turn. I also had Maui in my hand, so library was pretty good in my experience. I think it's kind of better than Queen's Castle sometimes because that 8 willpower is just right outside of some attacks, whereas the 7 willpower can fall to some things that are pre-established. Next up, we are on 4 Merlin Rabbits, a 4-cost uninkable character, 2/3 stat line, questing for 1. When you play him, when he leaves play, you're going to draw a card. Great way to keep up with the draw with all of those opposing decks that aren't going to want you to not do that. It's very good into the Steel matchup because if they banish it, you're just drawing even faster. Into Emerald Steel, it's one of the cards you definitely want to keep in your starting hand if you think you can get to it before they discard enough cards from your hand. If you have other things to draw like Chernobog's Followers and Magic Brooms to keep your card draw up in the early game, keep cycling new cards in your hand. Rabbit is definitely a keeper in that starting hand to keep that pressure on. He is a very good card into really anything Steel and anything that's going to try to remove him as opposed to do anything else. If he can eat up removal, it's always good, and if he doesn't, he can sing Friends on the other side. Another card that can sing Friends on the other side is going to be Merlin Goat, a 4-cost inkable character, 4/3 stat line, questing for 1. When you play this character, when he leaves play, gain 1 lore. He is one of the great ways to close the game against Steel Song. And against Steel Song, they're going to be removing a lot of your characters, but you can keep some pretty good pressure on them by removing a lot of their characters in return. And if you do that into the late game, which is entirely possible, I've seen many Steel Song games with Ruby Amethyst go to a point where I'm at 10 or 11 ink. All of a sudden I have a Merlin Goat and a Snake in my hand, and I'm able to go ahead and close that game out. That's exactly how I went 1-1. Also against Steel Song in Swiss at the tournament. I was at 17 from my quest and from a location that I had in play, and I had Goat, Snake, Goat, and so that is going to go ahead and net you 3 lore and get you to 20. Even though I do think that the library in a lot of instances is potentially better than the Queen's Castle, I am still playing 2 Queen's Castle. It's a super good card into the Sapphire matchup still, unless they're playing like Cusco or Hideaway, which some of them have teched in more, but I think people have kind of altered how they're playing at Sapphire to deal with that. So if you don't focus in as much on the locations, make them think maybe you don't have them, let them go ahead and ink those hideaways. You're going to be able to take advantage of the Queen's Castle, but it's a 4-cost inkable location, 1/7, 1 to move in, 7 willpower. It's going to be netting you 2 passive lore at the beginning of each of your turns, which is fantastic. Always remember to grab that location lore at the beginning of your turn. People aren't always going to be as friendly in a big tournament as they are in a smaller like league when you're forgetting your lore lore triggers at the beginning of your turn. They don't have to let you take them later in the turn. And at the start of your turn, for each character you have here, you may go ahead and draw a card, which if you can get some characters in here and keep this alive, which isn't always possible in the current meta, you are going to be able to net some decent card draw and push yourself well ahead. This is a card I was previously playing 2 of, and then 3 of, and then ended up on 4 of. It just is really good. It didn't stick out to me quite how good this card is until I started playing more of them and playing against them and getting my characters banished by them. It is going to be Elsa the Fifth Spirit, a 5-cost inkable character, 2/5 stat line, questing for 1, has rush and evasive, and it's doing Pinocchio shenanigans when it comes into play and exerting an opposing character. Fantastic way to deal with Diablos. Cannot stress this enough. Great answer for Diablos and most of those other evasive characters. It is also evasive itself, so it is going to keep from taking in any damage and potentially leave you with a shift target, which is great. Jumping over to another 5-cost character, we are on 4 Maui Hero to All, a 5-cost inkable, 6/5 stat line, which is a fantastic stat line. He has rush and reckless. This character can't quest and must challenge every turn, and this character can challenge the turn they are played. Maui is fantastic into pretty much everything, banishes most characters you're going to come up against, eats up damage from some of those damage cards, potentially is going to take a couple damage cards from your opponent to remove, or 1 damage card in something like an Anna in that green steel matchup. Did see my opponent take advantage of that. Against Amethyst Steel, I was able to take advantage of him to sing a song when they didn't have anything for me to attack into, or it was going to be an unfavorable attack and I would rather let them attack into me instead of getting an opportunity to quest to try to deal with my Maui that way. And I knew I was getting ready to be prepared into the following turn because they were going to set up several characters, so I went ahead and sang friends on the other side with Maui and then hard cast 2 more friends on the other side on turn 6, drew 6 cards and passed it over, and they were like, wow, I didn't want to see you do that. Next up in the 6-cost slot, we are on 2 Madame Medusa, a 4/4 for 6 uninkable character, questing for 1. When you play it, you may go ahead and just do a targeted banish. It's going to be a great way to deal with those Robin Hoods, Diablos, Lyles in the Amethyst Emerald matchup. It's going to be a great way to deal with all those small, heavy questers like Piglet and stuff like that, so Madame Medusa is going to be very good. One of my biggest regrets in this particular tournament was playing 2 Madame Medusa and 1 Lady Tremaine, as opposed to just making the choice to play 3 Madame Medusa. Lady Tremaine was just not netting me value, which is funny because one of the cards I cut from this deck prior, I cut 2 Bee King Undisputeds to play an additional Brawl and a Madame Medusa because the Bee King Undisputed wasn't really getting me value, and the Madame Medusa didn't give me value for the same reason the Bee King wasn't. They just generally had too many characters on the board, but she is a 6-cost uninkable character, 3/4 stat line, questing for 2, shifting for 4, and when you play this character, each opponent chooses and banishes one of their characters. So your opponent is choosing, so you're generally not going to get a super favorable banish, but she is pretty cool. And yeah, I had the enchanted, so I had to bust it out. Next up in the 7-cost slot, I'm sure you all saw this one coming, but we are on 4 Be Prepared, a 7-cost uninkable action song. This is going to be singable by the 1 bigger character we are playing in this deck, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's just going to straight up go ahead and banish all characters, clear the field, and get ready for a reset to try to lock things down with some of those other removal spells. This is where Lady Tremaine can be really good, is after a Be Prepared, but with only 1 in the deck, I just didn't really get an opportunity to take advantage of that. And in that second Emerald Steel matchup, I was really shocked. I went through almost half of my deck because I was drawing very aggressively. They were discarding my hand very aggressively as well, and all of my Be Prepareds were in the bottom half of my deck, so I just didn't see a Be Prepared and wasn't able to pull that game out. Last up in the 8-cost slot, we are on 2 Elsa the Fifth Spirit, an 8-cost uninkable character, 4/6 stat line, questing for 3, shifting for 6 onto those Elsa Fifth Spirits, so it's fantastically on curve with that. Fifth Spirit's coming down on 5, Elsa Spirit of Winter is coming down on 6. When you play this character, exert up to 2 chosen characters they can't ready at the start of their next turn, which is a crazy additional bit to that. So you're going to be able to get them exerted and then have an additional turn to play things to deal with them, like Maui and stuff like that, to get some of their bigger characters off the board, deal with those beasts, deal with those Robin Hoods. Some of the bigger steel threats are really going to have a hard time with that, and particularly into the steel matchup, she can be really good if you're able to get her down, because she does have 6 willpower, and so she's not going to die to something like Zeus, so they may have to use dual removal or get an opportunity to attack into her, which you don't always have to allow them if you're going to try to take advantage of with bounce shenanigans, or you can Be Prepared with her instead of questing, which isn't always relevant, but sometimes you may want to do. So that is the Ruby Amethyst deck list I ended up in 5th place with. Like I said, I was in 8th going into top 8. and played the first place seed. So I played somebody who had been doing very well all day, very competent player playing Emerald Steel, a guy by the name of Patrick, very nice guy. He had actually seen the channel before, so it was always really cool to meet those people. The event that I played at was at Storm Surge Games in Deltona, Florida. So if you want to check them out, definitely do so. They've been carrying Lorcana since like set 3, and this is their first set championship. So it was great to see an 18-player turnout at the event, and I was super happy with 5th. So for 5th place, the event was only $15 to enter. For 5th place, I of course got my Mirabel, which is great, and we were awarded 4 prize packs. In one of my prize packs, I opened a foil Merlin Rabbit. They didn't have any Shimmering Skies packs to give away, so I got 2 Inklands and 2 Floodborn packs. That's what I was given. I didn't necessarily choose that. I would have been fine with anything, so it didn't really matter. I have those cards, but I opened a foil Merlin Rabbit, I opened a legendary Donald Duck, and I also went ahead and opened an enchanted Shere Khan. So I ended up leaving the event for $15 with about $120 worth of prizing, so can't complain about that at all. It is funny, the enchanted Shere Khan is actually worth more than the enchanted Mirabel, so that was kind of the better prize out of the two, but 2 very cool cards. The Mirabel is very pretty even though it's unplayable. Shere Khan isn't really seeing a lot of play either, but again, very cool card. Who doesn't love the Jungle Book? But that being said, that is the breakdown on the deck list. What do you think of it? Is there other stuff that you would have played? Is there things you would have done differently? Different matchups you would have teched for? Do you think I'm crazy to not play SISU? I hear that a lot, but thank you so much for sticking around to the end. Remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. About half of the people who watch the channel aren't subscribed, so hit that subscribe button already. Get notified when new videos go live. We're putting out 2 videos a week on Monday and Friday, and when you see those toys, video games, and sweet enchanteds for $15 off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.